Well, hey there, teachers. Last week I put a call out for questions, and in this video, I'm gonna answer them. Okay, now first things first, I gotta say, I am not a guru. Like, I called out for questions. Doesn't mean I've got the answers, or even the best answers, or even mediocre answers. I'll give you my answers. And at the end of the day, that's the best I can do. But what I hope to do is to create a conversation. I've been reading a lot of the work of the Irish poet David Whyte lately, and he says that all of reality is conversational by nature. The wind going under the wing of an airplane of this curved shape, it has a conversation with the wing so that it actually bears our weight. And he says that's a metaphor for how everything works. Everything is a conversation. And I think that's especially true when it comes to education. So I'm gonna do my best to answer the questions that you guys gave, and I'm not gonna answer all of them because there were a lot, but here we go. Okay, Greg Easley asks, what's the best way to make sure you're actually using a doc for evidence and not merely summarizing? I think I can speak to this in two ways. The first has to do with how we interpret the document, how the students interpret it, and then secondly, how do they end up using it? So in terms of interpretation, I always teach my students that they need to understand two things about a document. Number one, what does it say? And number two, what does it mean? The question, what does it say, means, okay, you can summarize this. What can you actually put your finger on in this document, and then what does it say? Summarize that. So the US Constitution puts most of the power in the hands of the Congress. It's not the only summary of that document, but it's one summary of that document. But then what does it mean is, okay, now you understand what it says. Okay, now you've got a question and an argument that you're making. What does this document mean and your summary mean in response to that, in support of that evidence? So that's number one. Two questions. What does it say? What does it mean? That helps the students separate the two purposes of the document. But then when it comes to actually writing about that document, I always, if you've ever watched any of my videos, this is what I do, and I think it's helpful. It's not elegant. Nobody's going to win any, Pulitzer Prizes for this, but it does help them. That is, in your body paragraphs, you actually summarize the document in a sentence, and then the next sentence begins with, this shows. And after that comes the analysis, where you have to show how your evidence, or how that document, more to the point, proves your thesis. So by putting the summary first, and then another sentence that says this shows, and then how it shows that it supports the thesis, the students actually see that there are two distinct steps to supporting an argument with a document. Okay, so I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what I do. Okay, now Jennifer Ramirez Andrade said, how do we take effective notes from the book without writing everything down? To me, one of the most important things students could ever get used to is to read with a purpose. They're going to come to that text thinking everything that's mentioned in that textbook is equally important to what they're trying to do, and it's not. So in any textbook worth its salt, at the beginning of the chapter or at the end of the chapter, there's going to be some kind of learning focus, or if there's not one, then you could just give them the one that's in the CED, the learning objective. And so then as they read, they have something to guide them. They actually know what they're looking for. They're not sitting there passively taking all the information in as if it's equally important, but they are looking for the information that helps them in their cause. And this is basic stuff. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but one thing that I found really helpful, for myself and for my students, is to practice summarizing what you find in the textbook. If the students are able to summarize the information in their own words concisely, then oh my goodness, that will help them in their learning so much. And let me tell you what I mean. What I've done before is, for every paragraph that's in the textbook, I ask them to write a one-sentence summary. And I have two criteria when it comes to summarizing. It has to be concise and it has to be complete. And let me tell you, doing both of those things is no easy task. So it has to be concise, which is to say a single sentence, but it also has to be complete. Everything within that paragraph has to be represented, at least at a broad level, within that sentence. And so once they're done with that, they actually have, maybe on a single page or a half a page or 3/4 of a page, the entire summary of a chapter. And they've done it in their own words, and all the research suggests that that's what helps you get it in your brain and stick there and reproduce it when you need it. And the thing is, they're not going to want to do this. We already have enough problems with students not wanting to read their books. This is actually going to create another layer of difficulty on top of that, because reading is hard enough as it is, and that's just it's kind of a passive exercise. But to get them to be active readers and actually take that information and digest it, metabolize it, and then reproduce it in a sentence, that's hard work. But my suggestion is, if you're going to do this, then try it in class first. I would give them 3 paragraphs, require them to summarize each of those paragraphs in their own words, concise and complete, and then at the end of class, give them some time. At the end of class, then give them a quiz. And if it were me, I wouldn't make that quiz count or anything, but it's just they think it's going to count, and it gives them some incentive to do it, and they will see that how much of that information that they actually remember by doing the work of summarizing, and then hopefully that will give them some kind of a vision for continuing to do it in the future. I don't know, I hope that helps. Okay, Sammy Joe says, my kids are struggling a lot with contextualization and how to use historical evidence in an argument. I heard a lot of people talking about contextualization, so let's talk about that. As with almost every skill that I teach in my classroom, I want to help students learn that they already know how to do that skill apart from the content of this course. So in order to do that, I like to put up a still frame from a show or a movie that everybody's seen and then have a conversation about it. So if I put up this frame right here from Stranger Things and I ask the kids, tell me what this is, and they're going to tell me that's a demogorgon. I'll say, okay, what's a demogorgon? And they'll say, oh, it's this creature from the Upside Down. I'll say, okay, what is the Upside Down? Well, it's this realm where there's like floaty things and it's like a carbon copy of Hawkins and whatever. And I'll say, wait, how did this demogorgon get into Hawkins? I'll say, oh, where there's this lab and there's this girl named 11 and she has these mental powers and it broke open the gate and it came through and all this sort of thing. They'll just go ahead and they'll give me the whole context of that frame. And then I'll ask them, in order to interpret this frame, is it important for me to know what year they shot this movie, or in what frame rate they shot this movie, or in what size sensor was in the camera, or whatever? They say no. In order to understand this frame, you don't need to know any of that. All you need to know is the surrounding context that makes sense of that frame. And so then I'll say, aha, okay, now we get to introduce contextualization, and look, you already know how to do this. The problem is you know the story of Stranger Things, and that's easy for you, but you don't know the historical content that's gonna make sense out of contextualization in this context. But you will, you absolutely will. I gotta move, that sun is bugging me. And so the point is, when they start doing actual contextualization for their essays or for document interpretation or whatever, we now have a shared sense of language and understanding and meaning, because they'll go to interpret this document, put it in historical context, or write a contextualization paragraph, and they'll use all sorts of things that happened before the time period of the prompt that actually aren't related to it at all. And I'll say, wait, remember the Stranger Things thing? That's essentially 35mm film, and that it came out in 2011. I don't know, I can't remember what year it came out, but regardless, that's unrelated stuff. And you don't need to know that in order to set this argument up. So then I say, okay, now that we know that, what is the Upside Down? Okay, what is the Demogorgon? What is 11? Who was the gate that came up? So now we have some shared language. One of the best ways to learn something is to attach it to something that they already know. And so if they're struggling with contextualization, attach it to a skill that they already know how to do. They just don't know how to do it in this context. So what I always say to my students is, okay, let's go back about 50 to 100 years in our contextualization paragraph, and closer to 50, then 100. And I want you to give me 3 vocabulary words, 3 or 4 vocabulary words that relate to this argument. And we do this all live. I write it all on the board, and I'll say, okay, this is related, very good. This is not related, nope, we're not going to use that. So then I'll ask them to explain. So then I'll ask them to write a few sentences explaining those 3 vocabulary words, those 4, however many they came up with, and then the next sentence needs to connect your contextualization to your thesis. So the introductory paragraph has 3 elements: the contextualization, the connection, and the thesis. And that connection sentence just needs to show how these 2 elements, the contextualization and the thesis, are related. So it could be something as simple as, and so this is why this set the economic stage for whatever. Just so that it's clear that the things you just mentioned in your contextualization relate and set the stage for your thesis. All right, I hope that's helpful. The next question, Tiffany Elizabeth said, time management, period. Yeah, a lot of people said time management, and I got some thoughts. All right, we had to move again. Okay, when it comes to time management, I've actually been reading a book, I just finished it, that is absolutely marvelous. I highly recommend it. It's called Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. And his whole thesis in that book is that we have this existential struggle with time because we believe we are not mortal. Like these detailed organizers that we have where we plan out every minute of our day, it's just a way, these productivity programs that, promise that they're going to help you get control of your time. They're really just a way of saying you don't have to observe any limits. If you just get this system down, you don't have to observe any limits that every mortal actually, has to observe. In other words, if you can manage your time just right, you can have it all. And Berkman says that's stupid. That's my, crass summary of it. And he says we are mortal. We must make decisions. The nature of reality requires us to make decisions, and we cannot actually have it all. No matter how well we organize our time, we have to make decisions. And so in my experience, one of the main things I can do for my students is to help them reimagine their relationship to time and help them realize that they do actually have to make these decisions. Like, I don't know of anything probably more anathema to students in this day, in this age, than to say you actually can't have it all. You can't do all the sports. You can't take all the AP classes and also have a life and get into the exact college that you want. Like, all of these don't fit into a life that is sustainable. So I think what a lot of students are asking when they ask about time management is, how can I have it all? And the answer is, you can't. And the thing is, if you tell your students that, I don't even think they're going to believe you. Like, the culture is so powerful on this that I don't think there's almost anything we can do about it. But all I know is to say this to them and to help them understand you can't have it all. However, for a student who does understand that and really is struggling with time management, like, how do I do this and do that and make sure that I'm still, a functioning human being? here's what I have to say. Reality cannot be hacked. I think one of the great losses of virtue in our time is the loss of patience. We want everything right now. And there are some things that can only be had, I would say, I guess maybe everything, most things, I don't know, that can only be had in the time that it takes to deliver itself. For example, knowledge takes its own time. If you want to read a history book, that takes time, and you cannot speed it up. But that can't be true, right? There's a whole industry that summarizes books. Like you get a 600-page tome on, Ulysses S. Grant, but then you've got the, 50-page version, which tells you all, or the 15-page version that tells you all the juicy bits. Like, isn't that the same thing? Like, can't you get as much out of that as you can out of the book? No, you can't. It takes time. The knowledge that you gain occurs in the time that it takes. It's spending time in the presence of these great arguments or these great stories, these great narratives. It can't be had in the small pamphlet. So anyway, this is a soapbox. I shall step down off of it now. But as far as students managing their time, supposing that they understand those first two things I said, and they're just like, I just can't get it all done. It's like, okay, well, I don't have anything novel to offer here. Like, do you have a schedule? Like, do you have a calendar? Do you have a planner? Like, those are the things that help you manage your time. And are you getting distracted when you are doing your reading, when you're doing your studying? Like that makes things take longer. Like when we get in that flow state, when we get into the place where we are really studying or really focusing, and then we get distracted, it's like it takes a long time to get back into that state. And so there's no magic here. There's none. So, when it comes to time management, I don't know. I hope that helps, maybe. All right, I think that's all I have time for today. Thank you so much for sending in your questions. And the thing is, I know I left a lot of those questions on the table, but you guys gave me a ton of ideas for lots of new videos that are going to come out on this channel. So make sure you're subscribed. And, I hope this helped. Like I said, this is supposed to be a conversation. This is not just a one-way thing where the guru comes down from the mountain and says, here, have this. That's not me. I don't have that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know, and look forward to some more videos because y'all gave me the ideas and I am listening. So I'll see you in the next one.